Aemond Targaryen is an extremely complex and interesting character that has been introduced in the House of the Dragon series. At first glance, he may seem to be just a younger version of his uncle, Daemon, but there is so much more depth to him, especially in the books. The book is written by Grand Maester Munkun, who uses several sources of information such as the Archmaester of the Citadel, Orwell, Septon Eustace, and a court fool named Mushroom. Since they are different sources, their tellings sometimes do not intersect with each other, but still, the Fire and Blood book gives us a good view of Aemond and his influence in the universe. The births of Aemond and his older brother Aegon were the cause of some strife at the court of Viserys I. The king had named Rhaenyra, his only surviving child by his first marriage, his official heir in 105 AC, but refused to change the order of succession after the birth of two healthy sons. This eventually led to the rise of the Queen's Party at the royal court, as opposed to the party of the princess. Additionally, Prince Daemon Targaryen, the younger brother of King Viserys and Aemond's uncle, was said to be notably cool towards Aemond and Aegon, as their births had pushed him back even further in the line of succession as well. The sins of the fathers are oft visited on the sons, wise men have said, and so it is for the sins of the mother too. The enmity between Queen Alicent and Princess Rhaenyra was passed on to their sons, and the Queen's three boys, the princes Aegon, Aemond, and Daeron, who is the third brother of Aemond and Aegon, who for some reason has not appeared in the show, grew to be bitter rivals of their Valyrian nephews, resentful of them for having stolen what they regarded as their birthright, the Iron Throne itself. In 112 AC, when Aemond was 10 years old, his brother-in-law, Sir Laenor Velaryon, died. Aemond accompanied his parents and siblings to Driftmark to attend Laenor's funeral. Both Aegon and Helaena were dragon riders. Helaena now flew Dreamfire, the she-dragon who had once carried Rhaena, Maegor the Cruel's black bride, whilst her brother, Aegon's young Sunfire, was said to be the most beautiful dragon ever seen upon the earth. Even Prince Daeron had a dragon, a lovely blue she-dragon named Tessarion, though he had yet to ride. Only the middle son, Prince Aemond, remained dragonless, but his grace had hopes of rectifying that, and had put forward the notion that perhaps the court might sojourn to Dragonstone after the funeral. A wealth of dragon's eggs could be found beneath the dragon mount, and several young hatchlings as well. Prince Aemond could have his choice, if the lad was bold enough. Even at 10, Aemond Targaryen did not lack for boldness. The king's jibes stung, and he resolved not to wait for Dragonstone. What did he want with some puny hatchling or some stupid egg? Right there at high tide was a dragon worthy of him. Vhagar, the oldest, largest, and most terrible dragon in the world. Even for a son of House Targaryen, there are always dangers in approaching a dragon, particularly an old, bad-tempered dragon who has recently lost her rider. His father and mother would never allow him to go near Vhagar, Aemond knew, much less try to ride her. So he made certain they did not know, sliding from his bed at dawn whilst they still slept, and stealing down the outer yard where Vhagar and the other dragons were fed and stabled. The prince had hoped to mount Vhagar in secrecy, but as he crept up to the dragon, a boy's voice rang out. "You stay away from her." The voice belonged to the youngest of his half-nephews, Joffrey Velaryon, a boy of 3. Always an easy riser, Joff had snuck down from his bed to see his own young dragon, Tyraxes. As Joff began to bawl, Aemond raced to Vhagar and clambered up onto her back. Later, he would say that he was so afraid of being caught that he forgot to be frightened of being burned to death or eaten. Vhagar roared, lurched to her feet, shook violently, then snapped her chains and flew, and the boy Prince Aemond Targaryen became a dragon rider, circling twice around the towers of High Tide before coming down again. But when he landed, Rhaenyra's sons were waiting for him. Joffrey had run to get his brothers when Aemond took to the sky, and both Jace and Luke had come to his call. The Valyrian princelings were younger than Aemond. Losing an eye and claiming Vhagar was a bit different in the books than in the show. While in the show, Rhaena and Baela are the ones who instigated the fight and woke up Jace and Luke, they aren't present in the books. Instead of those four, Aemond fights the 3 strong brothers. Baela and Rhaena are nowhere to be seen. In the books, Joffrey is the one who originally started fighting with him. He did not want his uncle to have the strongest dragon, while in the show it was Rhaena who was against him. In any case, they didn't want Aemond to have Vhagar for apparently no reason. Brother Strongs are somewhat expected since they were always rivaling their uncles and naturally did not want Aemond to succeed, while Rhaena has no real claim on that dragon. Dragons are not properties that can be passed down from parent to child. They choose their riders as much as the riders choose them. By Rhaena's logic, her claim was as good as Aemond since its previous rider before Lyanna Velaryon was Baelon Targaryen, who was the grandfather of Aemond. People tend to blame Aemond for the fight to begin, given that yes, he was gaslighting his cousins, but he was not the one who started the fight. Rhaena is the one who charges at him, and even then, he doesn't hit her, just pushes her aside. Then Baela punches him and Aemond punches him back. The girls were the ones who started the fight, and Aemond was defending himself. In my opinion, the one who truly escalated the whole situation and made things worse was Jace. He is the one who pulls out the knife because he gets angry after Aemond calls him a bastard. Then he lunges at him trying to stab and slash him. He did not pull out his life to defend his brother, but simply because he got angry at Aemond for calling him a bastard. People fail to realize how much worse this whole situation could have gotten. There was a strong possibility that Jace could have actually killed Aemond if the latter one was too slow. Afterward, King Viserys tried to make peace, requiring each of the boys to tender an apology to his rivals on the other side, but these courtesies did not appease the vengeful mothers. Queen Alicent demanded that one of Lucerys Velaryon's eyes should be put out, for the eye had cost Aemond. Princess Rhaenyra would have none of that, but insisted that Prince Aemond should be questioned sharply until he revealed where he had heard sons called Strongs. This line is a big deal and one of the most important scenes that deals with both Rhaenyra and Alicent's characterization. In the show, they made it out to be a throwaway line. However, in the books, it's very much a euphemism for torture. The Fire and Blood audiobook even emphasizes this line. To so name them was tantamount to saying they were bastards with no right of succession, and that she herself was guilty of high treason. When pressed by the king, Prince Aemond said it was his brother Aegon who had told him they were Strongs, and Prince Aegon said only, "Everyone knows. Just look at them." King Viserys finally put an end to the questioning, declaring he would hear no more. No eyes would be put out, he declared, but should anyone, man or woman or child, noble or common or royal, mock his grandsons as Strongs again, their tongues would be pulled out with hot pincers. His Grace further commanded his wife and daughter to kiss and exchange vows of love and affection, but their false smiles and empty words deceived no one but the king. As for the boys, Prince Aemond said later that he lost an eye and gained a dragon that day, and counted it a fair exchange. To prevent further conflict and put an end to these vile rumors and base calumnies, King Viserys further decreed that Queen Alicent and her sons would return with him to court, whilst Princess Rhaenyra confided herself to Dragonstone with her sons. Henceforth, Sir Eric Cargill of the Kingsguard would serve as her sworn shield, whilst Breakbones returned to Harrenhal. This scene is also one of the most important moments in Aemond's life. In this instant, from Aemond's point of view, it might seem that his father does not care when he sees his son getting injured and continues showing favoritism towards his firstborn daughter, Rhaenyra. This was made clear when Viserys instantly shifts his anger from Kingsguards for not protecting his children to Aemond for spreading lies. In that exact moment, we can see the childish innocence leaving Aemond's eyes as he sees how his father makes it clear who he cares more for. His trueborn son, who had just lost an eye, will be half blind for the rest of his life, and yet he shows more concern for the rumors about his daughter. In that moment, Aemond has felt that he has been let down by his family once more, just like the rest of his life, but this time it was his father. It is lack of love and clear favoritism of his father towards his daughter that molds Aemond as the young man that we see later in the series. To celebrate his recovery, a feast was held on the first day of 127 AC. The princess and the queen were both commanded to attend with all their children. In a show of amity, each woman wore the other's color and many declarations of love were made to the king's great pleasure. Prince Daemon raised a cup to Sir Otto Hightower and thanked him for his leal service as hand. Sir Otto in turn spoke of the prince's courage, whilst Alicent's children and Rhaenyra's greeted one another with kisses and broke bread together at the table, or so the court chronicles record. Yet late in the evening, after King Viserys had departed, for his grace still tired easily, Mushroom tells us that Aemond One-Eye rose to toast his Valyrian nephews, speaking in mock admiration of their brown hair, brown eyes, and strength. I have never known anyone so strong as my sweet nephews, he ended. So let us drain our cups to these 3 strong boys. Still later, the Fool reports, Aegon the Elder took offense when Jacaerys asked his wife Helaena for a dance. Angry words were exchanged and the 2 princes might have come to blows if not for the intervention of the Kingsguard. Whether King Viserys was ever informed of these incidents, we do not know, but Princess Rhaenyra and her sons returned to their own seat on Dragonstone the next morning. In 129 AC, when Aemond was 19 years old, his father, King Viserys I Targaryen, died. Dawn was breaking over the city before Queen Alicent dispatched the Kingsguard to bring her sons Aegon and Aemond to the council. One-eyed Prince Aemond, 19, was found in the armory donning plate and mail for his morning practice in the castle yard. It was not a raven who took flight for Storm's End that day, but Vhagar, oldest and largest of the dragons of Westeros. On her back rode Prince Aemond Targaryen with a sapphire in the place of his missing eye. Your purpose is to win the land of one of Lord Baratheon's daughters, his grandsire Sir Otto told him before he flew. Any of the 4 will do. Woo her and wed her, and Lord Boros will deliver the Stormlands for your brother. Fail, I will not fail, Prince Aemond blustered. Aegon will have Storm's End, and I will have this girl. Aemond's older brother was crowned King Aegon II Targaryen, despite their older sister Rhaenyra having been Viserys' chosen heir, starting the War of Succession known as the Dance of the Dragons. Aegon's supporters realized that Rhaenyra would likely resist Aegon's coronation. As the previous Lord of Storm's End, Boremund Baratheon had been a supporter of Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, Rhaenyra's mother-in-law and one of her supporters. The Greens feared that Loras Boros Baratheon, the new lord, might side with Rhaenyra as well. Aemond was sent to Storm's End to convince Lord Boros to support Aegon by promising to marry one of his daughters. The murder of Lord Beesbury at the Green Council was not yet widely known. Most believed his lordship to be languishing in some dungeon. Whilst sundry familiar faces were no longer seen about court, no heads had appeared above the castle gates, and many still hoped that the question of succession might be resolved peaceably. The stranger had other plans, for surely it was his dread hand behind the ill chance that brought the 2 princelings together at Storm's End, when the dragon Arrax raced before a gathering storm to deliver Lucerys Velaryon to the safety of the castle yard, only to find Aemond Targaryen there before him. Boros Baratheon was a man of much different character than his father. Lord Boremund was stone, hard and strong and unmoving, Septon Eustace tells us. Lord Boros was the wind that rages and howls and blows this way and that. Prince Aemond had been uncertain what sort of welcome he would receive when he set out, but Storm's End welcomed him with feasts and hunts and jousting. Lord Boros proved more than willing to entertain his suit. I have 4 daughters, he told the prince. Choose any one you like. Cass is oldest, she'll be first to flower, but Floris is prettier. And if it's a clever wife you want, there's Maris. We have no record of which daughter Prince Aemond finally decided on, though Mushroom tells us that he kissed all 4 to taste the nectar of their lips. Save that it was not Maris. Munkun writes that the prince and Lord Boros were haggling over dates and dowries on the morning Lucerys Velaryon appeared. Vhagar sensed his coming first. Guardsmen walking the battlements of the castle's mighty curtain walls clutched their spears in sudden terror when she woke with a roar that shook the very foundations of Durin's defiance. Even Arrax quailed before that sound, we are told, and Luke plied his whip freely as he forced him down. Heavy rain falling as Lucerys leapt off his dragon, his mother's message clutched in his hand. He must surely have known what Vhagar's presence meant, so it would have come as no surprise when Aemond Targaryen confronted him in the round hall before the eyes of Lord Boros. "Look at this sad creature, my lord," Prince Aemond called out. "Little Luke Strong, the bastard." Lucerys Velaryon addressed himself only to Lord Baratheon. "Lord Boros, I have brought you a message from my mother, the Queen." Prince Aemond strode forward and made to snatch the letter from Lucerys' hand, but Lord Boros roared a command and his knights intervened, pulling the princelings apart. One brought Rhaenyra's letter to the dais, where his lordship sat upon the throne of the Storm Kings of old. No man can truly know what Boros Baratheon was feeling at that moment. The accounts of those who were there differ markedly from one another. Some say his lordship was red-faced and abashed, as a man might be if his lawful wife found him abed with another woman. Others declare that Boros appeared to be relishing the moment, for it pleased his vanity to have both king and queen seeking his support. Yet all the witnesses agree on what Lord Boros said and did. Never a man of letters, he handed the queen's letter to his maester, who cracked the seal and whispered the message into his lordship's ear. A frown stole across Lord Boros's face. He stroked his beard, scowled at Lucerys Velaryon, and said, "And if I do as your mother bids, which one of my daughters will you marry, boy?" He gestured at the 4 girls. "Pick one." Prince Lucerys could only blush. "My lord, I am not free to marry," he replied. "I am betrothed to my cousin Rhaena." "I thought as much," Lord Boros said. "Go home, pup, and tell the bitch your mother that the Lord of Storm's End is not a dog that she can whistle up at need to set against her foes." And Prince Lucerys turned to take his leave of the round hall. But Prince Aemond drew his sword and said, "Hold, Strong. First pay the debt you owe me." Then he tore off his eye patch and flung it to the floor to show the sapphire beneath. Prince Lucerys recalled his promise to his mother. "I will not fight you. I came here as an envoy, not a knight. I will have your eye or your life, Strong." At that, Lord Boros grew uneasy. "Not here," he grumbled. "He came as an envoy. I want no bloodshed beneath my roof." And there it might have ended, but for the girl, Maris, the second-born daughter of Lord Boros, less comely than her sisters. She was angry with Aemond for preferring them to her. In the book, Aemond is okay with letting Luke go. It was Maris who gaslighted him into following Luke, which shows us his insecurities that have been following him since his childhood. Outside, the storm was raging. It was bad weather for flying, even for a dragon, and Arrax was struggling to stay aloft when Prince Aemond mounted Vhagar and went after him. Had the sky been calm, Prince Lucerys might have been able to outfly his pursuer, for Arrax was younger and swifter. But the day was as black as Prince Aemond's heart, says Mushroom. And so it came to pass that the dragons met above Shipbreaker Bay. Watchers on the castle walls saw distant blasts of flame and heard a shriek cut the thunder. Then the 2 beasts were locked together, lightning crackled around them. Vhagar was 5 times the size of her foe, the hardened survivor of 100 battles. If there was a fight, it could not have lasted long. Arrax fell, broken, to be swallowed by the storm-lashed waters of the bay. Some say that the prince survived his fall, swam to safety, but lost all memory of who he was, spending the rest of his days as a simple-minded fisherman. While in the books it is written that Aemond wanted to fight his nephew because of their past, the show goes down a more different and believable route. Aemond uses Vhagar to claw and snap at him each time, nearly and cleverly missing the mark, which causes Lucerys to panic, which gives Aemond a lot of joy, since this is what he wants to get from Luke. Fear, humiliation, and helplessness. The same feelings that he felt when he was made fun of for not having a dragon. The same way he felt when he was ganged up on and lost his eye, or when his father failed him. However, despite his desire for pain, he is still not the monster as Mushroom portrays him to be. It is not written well in the book, but in the show we can clearly see the pure shock and terror on his face after losing control of Vhagar and accidentally killing Luke. He regrets the weight of what has been done. His expression makes me feel that this was the first time he has ever killed anyone, and out of everyone, it was his own nephew, his own blood. And for the first time in years, we see that child whose innocence died in the Driftmark. Lucerys Velaryon died with his dragon, Mundrun insists. This is undoubtedly correct. The prince was 13 years of age. His body was never found, and with his death, the war of ravens and envoys and marriage pacts came to an end, and the war of fire and blood began in earnest. Aemond Targaryen, who would henceforth be known as Aemond the Kinslayer to his foes, returned to King's Landing, having won the support of Storm's End for his brother Aegon and the undying enmity of Queen Rhaenyra. If he thought to receive a hero's welcome, he was disappointed. Queen Alicent went pale when she heard what he had done, crying, "Mother, have mercy on us all." Nor was Sir Otto pleased. "You only lost one eye," he is reported to have said. "How could you be so blind?" The king himself did not share their concerns, however. Aegon II welcomed Prince Aemond home with a great feast, hailed him as the true blood of the dragon, and announced that he had made a good beginning. Prince Daemon Targaryen swore to avenge Lucerys, promising his wife Rhaenyra a son for a son. Contacting Mysaria, Daemon arranged for blood and cheese to kill Aegon II's son Jaehaerys, which drove the child's mother Helaena slowly mad, eliminating her as a dragon rider. The sudden and unexpected murder of his son made Aegon II paranoid. He disliked his grandfather's more diplomatic ways to fight this war and appointed Sir Criston Cole as his hand. He devised a more aggressive strategy for the Greens than his predecessor as hand. Criston planned a trap for the Blacks at Rook's Rest while also forcing the submission of the nearby Crown land houses that were allied with Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen. Criston Cole marched out of King's Landing with 100 knights, 500 men-at-arms, and 3 times as many sellswords. Lord Rosby and Lord Stokeworth had recently submitted to Aegon to avoid execution in King's Landing, and Criston forced them to prove their loyalty by adding the strength of Rosby and Stokeworth to the Green Host. The army was thus slightly under 3,000 men in strength by the time they reached Duskendale. Duskendale was caught completely by surprise and unprepared, and quickly fell to Aegon II's forces and was sacked. Lord Gunther Darklyn was beheaded for treason, and most of his household knights swore their swords to Aegon, although a few chose death. Lord Staunton had been forewarned of the approach of Sir Criston's army. He closed the gates of Rook's Rest, but was unable to prevent Criston from burning his fields or killing his small folk and livestock. When supplies in Rook's Rest began to run low, Lord Staunton asked for assistance from Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, sending a raven to Dragonstone. Queen Rhaenyra's sons, Jaehaerys and Joffrey Valerian, were eager to join the fight atop their dragons Vermax and Tyraxes, but she forbade them to go. Instead, 9 days after Staunton's message, the Red Queen she was called for the scarlet scales that covered her. The membranes of her wings were pink, her crest, horns, and claws bright as copper, and on her back, in steel and copper armor that flashed in the sun, rode Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Sir Criston Cole was not dismayed. Aegon's hand had expected this, counted on it. Drums beat out a command, and archers rushed forward, longbowmen and crossbowmen both. Melees suffered a score of hits, but the arrows only served to make her angry. She swept down, spitting fire right and left. Knights burned in their saddles as the hair and hide and harness of their horses went up in flames. Then came an answering roar. 2 more winged shapes appeared. The king astride Sunfire the Golden, and his brother Aemond upon Vhagar. Criston Cole had sprung his trap, and Rhaenys had come snatching the bait. Now the teeth closed round her. Princess Rhaenys made no attempt to flee. With a glad cry and a crack of her whip, she turned melees toward the foe. Against Vhagar alone she might have had some chance, but against Vhagar and Sunfire together, doom was certain. The dragons met violently 1,000 feet above the field of battle as balls of fire burst and blossomed, so bright that men swore later that the sky was full of suns. Those closest to the dragons did not live to tell the tale. Those farther off could not see for the flame and smoke. It was hours before the fires guttered out. But from those ashes only Vhagar rose unharmed. Melees was dead, broken by the fall and ripped to pieces upon the ground. And Sunfire, that splendid golden beast, had 1 wing half torn off from his body, whilst his royal rider had suffered broken ribs, a broken hip, and burns that covered half his body. His left arm was the worst. The dragon flame had burned so hot that the king's armor had melted into his flesh. A body believed to be Rhaenys Targaryen was later found beside the carcass of her dragon, but it was so blackened that no one could be sure it was her. Beloved daughter of Lady Jocelyn Baratheon and Prince Aemond Targaryen, faithful wife to Lord Corlys Velaryon, mother and grandmother, the queen who never was, lived fearlessly and died amidst blood and fire. She was 55 years old. 800 knights and squires and common men lost their lives that day. Another 100 perished not long after when Prince Aemond and Sir Criston Cole took Rook's Rest and put its garrison to death. King Aegon II did not die, though his burns brought him such pain that some say he prayed for death. Carried back to King's Landing in a closed litter to hide the extent of his injuries, his grace did not rise from his bed for the rest of the year. Septons prayed for him, maesters attended him with potions and milk of the poppy, but Aegon slept 9 hours out of every 10, waking only long enough to take some meager nourishment before he slept again. None were allowed to disturb his rest, save his mother and Queen Dowager and his hand, Sir Criston Cole. His wife never so much as made the attempt, so lost was Helaena in her own grief and madness. "You must rule the realm now, until your brother is strong enough to take the crown again," the king's hand told Prince Aemond. Nor did Sir Criston need to say it twice, writes Eustace. And so one-eyed Aemond the Kinslayer took up the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. Yet Aemond did not assume the style of king, but named himself only Protector of the Realm and Prince Regent. Sir Criston Cole remained Hand of the King. Supremely confident in his own prowess as a warrior and the might of his dragon Vhagar, Aemond was eager to take the battle to the foe. Contemptuous of his half-sister Rhaenyra, Aemond One-Eye saw a greater threat in his uncle Prince Daemon and the great host he had gathered at Harrenhal. Summoning his bannermen and council, the prince announced his intent to bring the battle to his uncle and chastise the rebellious river lords. He proposed to strike the riverlands from both east and west, and thus force the lords of the Trident to fight on two fronts at once. Jason Lannister had assembled a formidable host in the western hills, 1,000 armored knights, and 7 times as many archers and men-at-arms. Let him descend from the high ground and cross the Red Fork with fire and sword, whilst Sir Criston Cole marched north from King's Landing, accompanied by Prince Aemond himself on Vhagar. The two armies would converge on Harrenhal to crush the traitors of the Trident between them, and if his uncle emerged from behind the castle walls to oppose them, as he surely must, Vhagar would overcome Caraxes and Prince Aemond would return to the city with Prince Daemon's head. Not all of the members of the Green Council favored the prince's bold stroke. Aemond had the support of Sir Criston Cole, the Hand, and that of Sir Tyland Lannister, but Grand Maester Orwell urged him to send word to Storm's End and add the power of House Baratheon to his own before proceeding, and Iron Lord, Lord Jasper Wilde, declared that he should summon Lord Hightower and Prince Daeron from the south, on the grounds that 2 dragons are better than 1. The Queen Dowager favored caution as well, urging her son to wait until his brother the king and his dragon Sunfire the Golden were healed so they might join the attack. Prince Aemond had no taste for such delays, however. He had no need of his brothers or their dragons, he declared. Aegon was too badly hurt and Daeron too young. Aye, Caraxes was a fearsome beast, savage and cunning and battle-tested, but Vhagar was older, fiercer, and twice as large. Septon Eustace tells us that the Kinslayer was determined that this should be his victory. He had no wish to share the glory with his brothers, nor any other man, nor could he be gainsaid, for until Aegon II rose from his bed to take up his sword again, the regency and rule were Aemond's. True to his resolve, the prince rode forth from the Gate of the Gods within a fortnight at the head of a host 4,000 strong. 16 days' march to Harrenhal, he proclaimed. On the 17th, we will feast inside Black Heron's hall, whilst my uncle's head looks down from my spear. And across the realm, obedient to his command, Jason Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, poured down out of the western hills, descending with all his power upon the Red Fork and the heart of the Riverlands. The lords of the Trident had no choice but to turn and meet him. Aemond Targaryen was too old and seasoned a battler to sit idly by and let himself be penned up inside walls, even walls as massive as Harrenhal's. The prince still had friends in King's Landing, and word of his nephew's plans had reached him even before Aemond had set out. When told that Aemond and Sir Criston Cole had left King's Landing, it is said that Prince Aemond laughed and said, "Past time," for he had long anticipated this moment. As Prince Regent, Aemond gathered an army together with Sir Criston Cole, the Hand of the King. They marched against Prince Daemon at Harrenhal, but during their march, King's Landing fell to Rhaenyra and Daemon. Prince Aemond had kept Vhagar with the main column throughout the march, thinking that his uncle might attempt to attack them on Caraxes. He reached Harrenhal a day after Cole, and that night celebrated a great victory. Small wonder then that when word of the fall of King's Landing reached him, the prince felt thrice the fool. His fury was fearsome to behold. First to suffer for it was Sir Simon Strong. Prince Aemond had no love for any of that ilk, and the haste with which the Castellan had yielded Harrenhal to Aemond Targaryen convinced him the old man was a traitor. Sir Simon protested his innocence, insisting that he was a true and loyal servant of the crown. His own great-nephew, Larys Strong, was Lord of Harrenhal and King Aegon's Master of Whisperers, he reminded the Prince Regent. These denials only inflamed Aemond's suspicions. The clubfoot was a traitor as well, he decided. How else would Daemon and Rhaenyra have known when King's Landing was most vulnerable? Someone on the small council had sent word to them. and Larys Clubfoot was Breakbones' brother, and thus an uncle to Rhaenyra's bastards. Aemond commanded that Sir Simon be given a sword. "Let the gods decide if you speak truly," he said. "If you are innocent, the warrior will give you the strength to defeat me." The duel that followed was utterly one-sided, all accounts agree. The prince cut the old man to pieces, then fed his corpse to Vhagar. Nor did Sir Simon's grandsons long outlive him. One by one, every man and boy with strong blood in his veins was dragged forth and put to death, until the heap made of their heads stood 3 feet tall. Thus did the flower of House Strong, an ancient line of noble warriors boasting descent from the first men, come to an ignoble end in the ward at Harrenhal. No true-born Strong was spared, nor any bastard save, oddly, Alys Rivers. Though the wet nurse was twice his age, thrice if we put our trust in Mushroom, Prince Aemond had taken her into his bed as a prize of war soon after taking Harrenhal, seemingly preferring her to all the other women of the castle, including many pretty maids of his own years. At Harrenhal, Aemond Targaryen and Criston Cole debated how best to answer the queen's attacks. Though Black Harren's seat was too strong to be taken by storm, and the Riverlords dared not lay siege for fear of Vhagar, the king's men were running short of food and fodder and losing men and horses to hunger and sickness. Only blackened fields and burned villages remained within sight of the castle's massive walls, and those foraging parties that ventured farther did not return. Sir Criston urged a withdrawal to the south, where Aegon's support was strongest, but the prince refused, saying, "Only a craven runs from traitors." The loss of Kingslanding and the Iron Throne had enraged him, and when word of the fish feed reached Harrenhal, the Lord Protector had almost strangled the squire who delivered the news. Prince Aemond favored an immediate attack upon King's Landing. None of the Queen's dragons were a match for Vhagar, he insisted. Sir Criston called that folly. "1 against 6 is a fight for fools, my prince," he declared. "Let them march south," he urged once more, "and join their strength to Lord Hightowers." Prince Aemond could reunite with his brother Daeron and his dragon. King Aegon had escaped Rhaenyra's grasp. This they knew. Surely he would reclaim Sunfire and join his brothers, and perhaps their friends inside the city might find a way to free Queen Helaena as well, so she could bring Dreamfire to the battle. 4 dragons could perhaps prevail against 6 if one was Vhagar. Prince Aemond refused to consider this craven course. As regent for his brother, he might have commanded the hand's obedience, yet he did not. Munkun suggests that this was because of his respect for the older man, whilst Mushroom suggests that the two men had become rivals for the affections of the wet nurse, Alys Rivers, who had used love potions and filters to inflame their passions. Septon Eustace echoes the dwarf in part, but says it was Aemond alone who had become besotted with the Rivers woman to such an extent that he could not bear the thought of leaving her. Whatever the reason, Sir Criston and Prince Aemond decided to part ways. Cole would take command of their host and lead them south to join Ormond Hightower and Prince Daeron, but the Prince Regent would not accompany them. Instead, he meant to fight his own war, raging fire on the traitors from the air. Soon or late, Queen would send a dragon or two out to stop him, and Vhagar would destroy them. And thus did the Kingmaker and the Kinslayer part, each to his own fate, whilst at the Red Keep, Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen set about rewarding her friends and inflicting savage punishments on those who had served her half-brother. Sir Luthor Largent, commander of the Gold Cloaks, was ennobled. Sir Laurent Marbrand was installed as Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard and charged with finding 6 worthy knights to serve beside him. Grand Maester Orwyl was sent to the dungeons, and Her Grace wrote the Citadel to inform them that her leal servant, Gerardus, was henceforth the only true Grand Maester. Freed from those same dungeons that swallowed Orwyl, the surviving Black Lords and Knights were rewarded with lands, offices, and honors. In the Riverlands, Sir Criston Cole abandoned Harrenhal, striking south along the western shore of the God's Eye with 3,600 men behind him. Death, disease, and desertion had thinned the ranks that had ridden forth from King's Landing. Prince Aemond had already departed, flying Vhagar. The castle stood empty no more than 3 days before Lady Sabitha Frey swooped down to seize it. Inside, she found only Alys Rivers, the wet nurse and purported witch who had warmed Prince Aemond's bed during his days at Harrenhal and now claimed to be carrying his child. No longer tied to castle or host, the one-eyed prince was free to fly where he would. It was war as Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had once waged, fought with dragonflame as Vhagar descended from the autumn sky again and again to lay waste to the lands and villages and castles of the Riverlords. House Darry was the first to know the prince's wrath. 3 days later, it was Lord Harroway's town left smoking. Lord's Mill, Blackbuckle, Buckle, Claypool, Swinford, Spiderwood. Vhagar's fury fell on each of them until half the Riverlands seemed ablaze. Prince Aemond had become the terror of the Trident, descending from the sky to rain fire and death upon the Riverlands, then vanishing only to strike again the next day 50 leagues away. Vhagar's flames reduced Old Willow and White Willow to ash and Hoghall to blackened stone. At Merrydown Dell, 30 men and 300 sheep died by dragonflame. The Kinslayer then returned unexpectedly to Harrenhal, where he burned every wooden structure in the castle. 6 knights and 20 men-at-arms perished trying to slay his dragon, whilst Lady Sabitha Frey only saved herself from the flames by hiding in a privy. She fled back to the twins soon after, but her prize captive, the witch woman Alice Rivers, escaped with Prince Aemond. As word of these attacks spread, other lords looked skyward in fear, wondering who might be next. Lord Mooton of Maidenpool, Lady Darklyn of Duskendale, and Lord Blackwood of Raventree sent urgent messages to the Queen, begging her to send them dragons to defend their holdings. Prince Daemon himself would take Caraxes to the Trident, together with the girl Nettles and Sheepstealer, to find Prince Aemond and Vhagar and put an end to them. On the 14th day of the prince's vigil, a shadow swept over the castle, blacker than any passing cloud. All the birds in the Godswood took to the air in fright, and a hot wind whipped the fallen leaves across the yard. Vhagar had come at last, and on her back rode the one-eyed Prince Aemond Targaryen, clad in night-black armor chased with gold. The prince helped his woman down from Vhagar's back, then turned to face his uncle. "Uncle, I hear you have been seeking us." "Only you," Daemon replied. "Who told you where to find me?" "My lady," Aemond answered. "She saw you in a storm cloud, in a mountain pool at dusk, in the fire we lit to cook our supplies. She sees much and more, my Alice. You were a fool to come alone." "Were I not alone, you would not have come," said Daemon. "Yet you are, and here I am. You have lived long enough, nuncle." "On that much we agree," Daemon replied. Then the old prince bade Caraxes bend his neck and climbed stiffly onto his back, whilst the young prince kissed his woman and vaulted lightly onto Vhagar, taking care to fasten the 4 short chains between belt and saddle. Daemon left his own chains dangling. Caraxes hissed again, filling the air with flame, and Vhagar answered with a roar. Prince Daemon took Caraxes up swiftly, lashing him with a steel-tipped whip until they disappeared into a bank of clouds. Vhagar, older and much larger, was also slower, made ponderous by her very size, and ascended more gradually in ever-widening circles that took her and her rider out over the waters of the God's Eye. The attack came sudden as a thunderbolt. Caraxes dove down upon Vhagar with a piercing shriek that was heard a dozen miles away, cloaked by the glare of the setting sun on Prince Aemond's blind side. The blood worm slammed into the older dragon with terrible force. Their roars echoed across the God's Eye as the two grappled and tore at one another, dark against a blood-red sky. So bright did their flames burn that fisher folk below feared the clouds themselves had caught fire. Locked together, the dragons tumbled toward the lake. The bloodworm's jaws closed about Vhagar's neck, her black teeth sinking deep into the flesh of the larger dragon. Even as Vhagar's claws raked her belly open and Vhagar's own teeth ripped away a wing, Caraxes bit deeper, worrying at the wound as the lake rushed up below them with terrible speed. And it was then, the tales tell us, that Prince Daemon Targaryen swung a leg over his saddle and leapt from one dragon to the other. In his hand was Dark Sister, the sword of Queen Visenya. As Aemond One-Eye looked up in terror, fumbling with the chains that bound him to his saddle, Daemon ripped off his nephew's helm and drove the sword down into his blind eye so hard the point came out the back of the young prince's throat. Half a heartbeat later, the dragon struck the lake, sending up a gout of water that was said to have been as tall as Kingspire Tower. Neither man nor dragon could have survived such an impact, the fisherfolk who saw it said. Nor did they. Caraxes lived long enough to crawl back onto the land. Gutted, with one wing torn from his body and the waters of the lake smoking about him, the blood worm found the strength to drag himself onto the lakeshore, expiring beneath the walls of Harrenhal. Vhagar's carcass plunged to the lake floor, the hot blood from the gaping wound in her neck bringing the water to a boil over her last resting place. When she was found some years later, after the end of the Dance of the Dragons, Prince Aemond's armored bones remained chained to her saddle, with Dark Sister thrust hilt deep through his eye socket. That Prince Daemon died as well, we cannot doubt. His remains were never found, but there are queer currents in that lake, and hungry fish as well. The singers tell us that the old prince survived the fall and afterward made his way back to the girl Nettles to spend the remainder of his days at her side. Such stories make for charming songs, but poor history. Even Mushroom gives the tale no credence, nor shall we. It was upon the 22nd day of the 5th moon of the year 130 AC when the dragons danced and died above the god's eye. Aemond Targaryen was 49 at his death. Prince Aemond had only turned 20. Vhagar, the greatest of the Targaryen dragons since the passing of Balerion the Black Dread, had counted 181 years upon the death. Thus passed the last living creature from the days of Aegon's conquest, as dusk and darkness swallowed Black Heron's accursed seat. Yet so few were on hand to bear witness that it would be some time before word of Prince Daemon's last battle became widely known.